Alright, I'm going to show you guys my tmaxx big block build. I'm going to call this the tmaxx on the cheap big block build, I guess. This is pretty much a stock 3.3 chassis tmaxx. And what I did was I installed a JL28 engine in there. Show you how I did it. Alright, so as you can see, stock chassis. And there's that beast of a motor, really powerful in this truck. Let's see, basically I had to make room for the front clutch bell. The shaft, the whole assembly is just longer on this engine. And I had to move the whole transmission forward. And if I remember right, because I built this about a year ago, or maybe longer, I basically shifted the transmission forward by one of the holes on the case itself. So if it had 4 holes on each side, I shifted it forward so it was using 3 of the existing holes. And you can see the first hole right there, right by my finger right there, my nail, that it's still supporting the chassis, and I put a nut on that side. So that was the original hole for the transmission when it moved forward. Let me show you the back. Let's see here. You can see I ground out the frame there. I put a little button head screw to hold the front of the trans in. And I did the same on this side too. So the trans is in there securely. Frame, these cross members or spars are still in the same holes. Everything else is original, or I guess the same as it was before. Rear drive shaft is, I want to say, from a Revo. It's a Revo drive shaft, and I think I just cut it to fit it in there. No big deal. That was pretty easy. I did have to clearance the chassis up here to fit the front drive shaft, which I ended up just shortening up, and that worked out pretty well too. Let's see. Another kind of cool thing about this, well, let's stick with the trans though here first. As you can see, I have 2 drive gears on there, and the reason was because the shaft is long for the the engine shaft, so I needed clearance from the transmission. And if I remember right, I just spaced these out with maybe a thin washer on each bolt, so they wouldn't actually squeeze. They wouldn't squeeze together when I bolted them up, if that makes sense. That way they didn't fracture or crack. Now I probably ran about a half a tank through this already. This motor's probably just about broke in. And no issues. I mean, this is holding up pretty well. And I imagine if this spur gear were to ever break, I could just swap them and put the rear on as the drive gear, because it's really only engaged in the front gear there, as you can see. And some of you might have noticed already. Look at that. Easy Start is on there. That's right, it fits on the JL28 motor. Now, the bolt pattern is the same. Let's see if I can get in there. The bolt pattern's the same, but the depth wasn't correct, because the shaft that sticks out of the engine is a little too long. Now, I imagine you could probably grind it off, but what I did, and you can see the little assembly there. Let me get a little screwdriver so I can point this out. This piece right here is actually from a Traxxas 3.3 motor, and it's the piece that basically bolts into the same area on the 3.3 motor. I had some junk 3.3s laying around, and they needed a spacer, and it worked perfectly. I had to hacksaw the inside of it off where the end shaft for the crankshaft actually rides, and I used it as a spacer, and it worked perfectly. And then, I was able to use the Easy Start. Now, one caveat with that is that I found you can't really use the glow starter with the big block motor because it just doesn't have enough power to power both. I was having trouble cranking it over, so I tried to disconnect the glow plug, and then that gave me enough power to crank the engine, so I just use a glow starter on the motor now. And the Easy Start works great. It's really handy. I personally really like that feature, and I wanted to keep that. I imagine you could probably still rig this up with reverse if you fiddled around with it. That's not a big issue for me. I just like popping wheelies. So I had to remount this servo, as you can see. Not too big of a deal. Just positioned it where it was out of the way of everything, drilled new holes, and bolted it in. And that was pretty much it. Other than that, like I said, this is stock. I got the aftermarket, these Proline trencher wheels on there, which are pretty sweet. This exhaust is from an HPI Savage. It's stock. I think I bought it off eBay for, I don't know, $5-10. It worked out really well mounting that up. And just made a little hanger out of a coat hanger. I mean, this thing's pretty solid and sturdy, stable. The JL motor worked out well because it's got the slide carb and it's got the same attachment. So I was able to really reuse everything factory, which kept it pretty simple. I did this mod. I finished building this probably in about 4 hours. And I liked it so much that I built a second one. And this is really just a display model, like a shelfer. This has never been ran. Motor's brand new. And I basically copied the same thing. Oh yeah, I did have to reposition the rear shock. I forgot about that. I just took a piece of stock plastic off of something in my collection. Got a junk drawer full of old plastic bits and pieces from cars, and I found something that worked. Drilled a hole, melted it a little bit, remounted it. No big deal. Clears that spring just fine. And I did the same thing up here too. You need the room for the exhaust there. And I'll tell you what, you can see this wheelie bar gets a lot of use because that's all this baby does. And that motor is, like I said, just about broken in. This thing was getting pretty fast near the end. I haven't used it in a while. It's been cold. It's, I don't know, about 2 degrees outside right now. It's middle of January in northern Illinois. So not too fun out there. But if you guys are looking to build something, take some time to build something, this is an awesome truck. You can get that motor on eBay. I want to say I got both of these for like $125. And it's a pretty stout motor. Like I said, I only got about a half gallon through it. But it runs well. I imagine it's going to last quite a while. I really don't beat on these things too much. I just like to ride wheelies, and this really, it does what I want it to. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys this build. Rather than going out and buying that big block chassis for $150 and then getting the motor and everything else, just do it to your stock truck. It just takes a minute. Oh, and I think I had to buy the engine mount. This is a big block engine mount in here. Let's see if I focus. For a tmaxx. I got that on eBay. I forget who manufactured it or machined it. It was around $35. So I guess that does add a little bit to the cost of this. But it's in there solid, no worries. Uses the stock mount, the stock hole, so you have the adjustment for the spur gear. So that's a pretty nice feature there too. I don't think you can really go wrong by attempting this build. If you mess up or you change your mind, you can always put everything back. You'll just have some clearance cut in the front. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, comment any ideas or thoughts on this. I had been researching a while. I didn't see anyone that had come up with something exactly like this. And here's my concoction. Thanks.